Well, what are we talking about today, Miss Danielle?
Okay, what is that difference of a luxury destination wedding planning? What does that mean? What
What
is
does it
that?
mean to have a luxury wedding and is it right for you? Because it's
Yeah,
not right for everybody.
no, absolutely not.
So we're going to
And
dive
that's
into that.
okay.
If you crave luxury but need guidance, then stay tuned for magic. Welcome to Wedding Tips and Tales with T.S. Wed, the podcast where we unveil the secrets to crafting the perfect luxury wedding. Join us for expert advice and insider tips that will make your special day unforgettable. Let's make your wedding dreams come true together.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Wedding Tips and Tales. My name is Taran and this is Danny. We are so excited that you joined us today.
Yay! Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Yay. Danny, first and foremost, what are you drinking today?
Because it is noon, I am drinking tea.
Correct. What does your cup say?
Mm. Let the adventure begin. I thought it was appropriate for today.
That feels right. Good
Right.
job.
Thank you. I'm very on theme. What are you drinking today, Taryn?
Well, out of a very fancy Estelle glass, I am drinking the new alcohol-free Moment drink. Have you heard of this?
I haven't, no.
So it is an alcohol-free drink. It comes in a can. I have the can to show the can. Here's the can.
You can't see it. It
Oh,
sounds like we are sponsored by them and we're not.
we're not. However, it's supposed to reduce stress and increase productivity. And so I am drinking it out of a very fancy drink at noon in hopes that I can be uber productive today.
And you can tell we're not sponsored by it because is it good or is it like kind of gross?
Oh, I don't know. Let me taste it. This is
Okay.
the first time I've tried this flavor. It's good. This is the blood orange, and it's good. It's not like super flavor forward because it only has like 15 calories, which I mean that's fantastic as well, and like no sugar at all. Um, but yeah, it's a great alternative to like wine. That's
Great. Okay.
nothing's a great alternative to
No,
wine,
that
but
feels better.
at noon.
It's like lying at noon. That feels better.
All right, so generally speaking, the way that Danny and I approach this is we define weddings into four different categories. The first category is a budget wedding. So this is a bride that is a couple, excuse me, this is a couple that is very, very cost efficient and looking to plan their wedding on a budget. I would call a budget bride that has $500 or less per person to spend on her wedding day. Does that seem fair?
Yeah. I mean, that number even sounds a little bit high almost, but I think with pricing and how much everything costs these days, like realistically, you're going to have to make significant cuts
Yeah.
to certain things and looks and visions and all of that if you're in that price point range. And so, yeah, I'd agree with that. I think budget is 500 per person or less.
Yeah,
Now,
which is
there's some wiggle
wild
room. There's
because
wiggle room, right? But
yeah, I think that maybe 10 years ago, it was very different. I think that you could have a lovely wedding for $500 a person. In fact, that's what we used to quote for the types of weddings that we planned 10 years ago, which we were planning for category number two, which is lovely. So you can
yeah,
have a lovely wedding. And I think that that category now is between 500 and $1,000 per person.
I'd agree.
Within that price point, you are going to have a perfectly lovely gathering of people. You're
Yeah.
going to host well. You're going to like have an actual full meal for your guests. You're going to be able to provide beverage service for your guests. You're going to have a photographer, a florist, like all of that. And you're going to have a lovely wedding.
And that I pulled out my calculator on my phone. So $500 per person. Let's say you have 50 people at your wedding. That's a $25,000 wedding.
Right.
Which, yeah. And that, I mean, 50 people I would say is probably on the lower end of a guest count. So, right, like, you got to do the math. If you're thinking of 100 guests are going to be at the 50,000 range, right? But yeah, I would say that's going to be your lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that we see a lot of weddings in the lovely category are even like picked up in publications a lot, don't you think?
Yeah, totally. I think the difference in lovely is that you're going to have a few more options, but you're not going to be able to do it all. And there might still be a couple DIY moments. And by DIY, I don't necessarily mean like, I'm not meaning you're making your florals on your own, but maybe you're getting married at a friend of a friend's venue, and so you got a discounted price. Or maybe, um, you know, you're making some of those kind of like, it's a friend of a friend elements that you're going to have included into it without it being all friends of friends, right? It's not necessarily that your photographer is your friend who also owns a camera, but it is some of those like, oh, we're getting married in my dad's backyard.
Mhm.
Like that's going to reduce your cost a lot because you're not
Investing in a venue.
right. And we did it. My dearest friend from high school, we did her wedding just last year, and that I would say, while it was our touch, it was more on the lovely side of things, in that like it was in her dad's backyard. It was like a friend photographer. We also had Lauren Fair there too, so that changes
That
things.
was like our gift, though. She didn't
Right.
invest in Lauren.
Right.
That
Right,
was
totally.
PS Wed investing in the
Yeah.
design, really
Again.
beautifully designed by you.
Yeah. So, but I would say like that was a lovely wedding and it came out beautifully. The guests had a really wonderful time. And there was absolutely not one thing wrong with that wedding. It was gorgeous. It was great.
It was
It was
gorgeous.
lovely.
A lovely wedding. And hopefully it'll be picked up for publication. So I think that lovely weddings can be of the caliber that are publishable and are no like they're given the notoriety
Mhm.
of being worth showing and worth displaying. And so you can
Oh,
absolutely have a lovely wedding within that price point. Now, for TS Wed specifically, we service luxury and ultra luxury clients. And so I would say that luxury weddings, I even want to say like they certainly can start out $1,000 per person. We don't have our clients start at that point
well,
anymore.
I think this is where it depends on your guest count, right? Because $1,000 per person for 10 people isn't like
you're not going to get a photographer.
right. You can't do that. So it depends on your guest count. The bigger your guest count, obviously, the bigger that budget is, and that's going to fly more. But what would you say, Taryn, is our average for a luxury wedding per person price point, would you say?
Generally speaking, what you'll see, what all of our clients will see on our website, even because we publish this, is that the average TS Wed wedding is going to start at 1,500 per person. And that also is taking into mind what you were saying earlier, is that guest count matters. And so we service primarily destination weddings. And so we're not looking at guest counts of 300 people. Instead, we're looking at smaller guest counts. I think that generally speaking, we're looking at somewhere between 25 and 75 people. And so that approximate price point is appropriate for the types of weddings that we plan and the types of guest counts that we service.
Right.
So to your point, I would say that the luxury market is somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000 per person on the whole. Understanding that guest count does give a little bit of fluidity there.
Right. And I'm going to say, like, okay, so for everyone listening who's losing their minds right now saying, well, like photography doesn't change cost based off guest count and videography doesn't change cost based off guest count. What do you say to those people? Because we've had that from our couples before too, right?
Oh, yes, of course. I think that what I would say to our people is that when you're up at the luxury level, we're working with luxury photographers and we're working with luxury DJs and luxury floral designers. And so while photographer A is going to charge X amount for 6 hours of photography, if that's a lovely photographer, someone that shoots perfectly fine images that you will probably cherish and find beautiful for the rest of your life, that's maybe not one of the top photographers rated in Brides. That's maybe not somebody who's been published in Harper's Bazaar. And so when you hit that level, when you get those accolades and you have that level of experience and that skill set, your pricing is just going to increase dramatically.
Right.
And so those luxury vendors are just going to be more expensive because, quite frankly, they are better. They're just better.
Yeah. And I think let's touch on that too in a minute. Let's to come back to too, though, the like per person price point. Yes, if you have one guest that comes or doesn't come, that's not really changing your overall budget, right? But this is what we're saying is an average. At the end of the day, when we have taken our weddings and divided it by the number of guests, this is what we're seeing consistently as falling in this price range. So of course, your DJ does not cost more necessarily based off your guest count, though there are some caveats to that. You might need more speakers, you might need better sound equipment, all of that, right? But, that cost isn't really changing. But overall, here's what your costs are going to be per person. Because at the end of the day, one extra person might mean a whole extra table, depending on how your guest count breakdown is going. It's going to be an extra flower arrangement, an extra chair, a whole bunch of other things. So this is what we're saying are averages based off our years of experience and going back at the end and saying, all right, this wedding spent this amount of money. Let's divide it by the guest count. And here are the ranges we fall in consistently.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And I would say too that when you're looking at that in terms of looking at the next tier, the final tier, which is ultra luxury,
Right.
it's just 2000 and above. Like I'm going to call it 2000 per person and above because we did an ultra luxury wedding last year. You know who I'm talking about.
Yep.
And they ended up spending, I think it was the final cost was 1.2 million for 100 guests.
Yep.
And that was a tremendous amount of money. And yet we also did an ultra luxury wedding this year. And I believe it was 300,000 for 11 guests. And so you can see how it really does. Like it was still ultra luxury, even though it was, a quarter of the price of the one that we did last year, but it really, really depends on your guest count.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. And I think both of those guests received the same sort of experience, right?
And in fact, they had the same photographer.
Yeah, absolutely right.
They
And so
had a
that's
lot of the same vendors.
yeah, totally,
Same
totally.
same forest too.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. That's right. Obviously we have favorites. But yeah, I think that makes sense. I guess let's maybe talk to everyone about the difference. I think photography is going to be the easiest way to do this, but probably floral too, of like, okay, these different categories. Obviously, you can mix and match some of the vendors within these categories. So if photography is a priority for you, but in the lovely range, you can do a luxury photographer for a lovely wedding. You just then have to make way more cost-effective choices on your florist. And maybe we don't have a videographer. Maybe our guest count comes down a little bit, stuff like that. But I would say for me, the difference between like a lovely photographer versus a luxury or an ultra luxury, it's not just about publications, though for some people that's important and they want that kind of recognition. Other people don't care about that so much. But it is the experience, right? So when you have a photographer who has been around all sorts of different family dynamics, all sorts of different planners, all sorts of different weather calls, all sorts of different, oh, the light is shining through the clouds this certain way. They're able to adjust and make changes and be really proactive in a way that someone who doesn't have that experience, because they're a lovely photographer, isn't going to have, right? So, like, would say probably one of our most used photographers, Lauren Fair, she's sensational at like picking out moments in a wedding that are like, oh, this is going to shoot a little weird this way. And so she frames it differently and she moves it differently. And you can't tell that this work is happening behind the scenes
Right.
because she's so good at what she does. And then when you get the photos, it's like, wow, how'd she make this look so amazing? It's like, because that's what she does. She's a luxury photographer and she has that experience. It's not to say a lovely photographer can't have experience or can't produce beautiful photos. They absolutely can. They're just not going to have that same level of experience and know-how that somebody at that higher price point generally has.
Right. And the same thing can be said for every single vendor. Like when we first started, we didn't start in the luxury market. We started in the budget market. And now we've been doing this for 15 years. And all of a sudden we're in the luxury and we're in the ultra luxury markets. Right. And part of that is not only experience, but it's also education. We make it a point to educate ourselves year over year as we move through this wedding planning world, and we network and we market and so we garner all of that great experience, which is fantastic, but we're also very actively pursuing an elevated level of service. And I think you can really speak to this too in terms of your design.
Yeah, I mean, and this goes for everything. Like, we are better planners and better designers now than when we started. We just are. And that is in part, sorry to all our former clients who had lovely, beautiful weddings, don't get us wrong. But like, there are just things that we have learned in the past that we now need to accommodate. So, okay, a tail moment. We've done obviously a lot of weddings in Hawaii. And so very oftentimes we will suggest like a catamaran or a boat trip, because what an amazing experience for all of your guests. After maybe our second or third now catamaran, where the guests were like, it was supposed to be a 5-hour tour, but we came back at 3 hours because we are all boat sick. Right. Now we just automatically include a little goodie bag for all of the guests prior to them leaving for the boat that includes Dramamine, that includes instructions as to why you're going to want this. And that's just like, that wasn't a failing on our part ahead of time, but we now have had that experience and that moment of like, oh man, we really should have like drugged them.
Yeah.
You
Well, and
know, like,
that's such an elevated experience. That's the type of experience that you're going to get with a luxury vendor is the type where you show up and there's cute little baggies full of Dramamine, sunscreen, cheapo sunglasses, and a note that says, take your meds because otherwise you're going to get sick. Like if you were to attend that, you would go, wow, this is really cool. Like I've never been on a catamaran at the Nepali coast on Kauai. And so I didn't realize that the water was this choppy. And so thank goodness we got this elevated service.
and
So,
this is stuff that like when you're discussing with vendors at the different level, it's kind of hard to um like say that up front, right? Like if someone's like, why are you guys so expensive compared to other planners or anything like that? It's like, because it's very situational, right? I can't tell you or you can't tell them in a discovery call, like, oh, because we're gonna give you a bag of Dramamine before you go on a boat,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
But this is like, as we're planning your wedding and as we're learning about who they are, we are taking from these past experiences and going, here's what worked, here's what didn't work. And we can forward think some problems because we've already had to deal with these problems in past events, right? And so that is the sort of like it's a high touch, but like hard to conceptualize at the front half what the difference is.
Right. And I think that that's why reviews are so important. Because, we can speak to anybody about like, oh, well, this happened and that happened and all, whatever. But if you have a client that goes, oh my gosh, like this was an important enough experience in my life that I want to leave a review on it. And here's why. And they say, oh, our wedding rained and Taran and Danny literally drove to every single
Oh
Target
my
on
God, do
the
you
island.
remember? Do you remember
This
Danny?
happened. Like, okay,
Oh,
tail. Here's a tail. We had a gorgeous couple, like the sweetest people of all time getting married on the island of Oahu. And for the love of all that is good, they had a tent, but their whole ceremony was scheduled to be outside. Their cocktail reception was scheduled to be outside. And it was utter downpour
yeah.
their whole way. It was so much. And so there's only so much you can do. Their ceremony was in a separate location from their cocktail and their dinner reception. And they had a very monochromatic, like very white, green, minimalist vibe. And so not only did we, of course, secure a tent for over the ceremony location itself, which was very important and clutch, but there was also going to be like 200 yards worth of walking for these guests. And so in like the day before the wedding, Danny and I scoured every single Target and every single Saks off Fifth, every single Ross on that entire island. We were in the car the whole
The
day
whole day.
for clear umbrellas with black trim.
Right.
And we got them.
Yeah.
It was just like,
It was chaos
it
for
was,
us,
yeah,
but
they
this
had no idea.
they
Thank
had no
God.
idea. They had no, we said, it's gonna rain. Don't worry, we have a plan. You guys go enjoy your Mai Tais by, the by in your hotel or by the pool where that's not raining over there. Like, don't you worry one bit. Meanwhile, Taryn and I are like running around like chickens with our heads cut off, going into literally every store, just being like, oh my God, hi, do you have umbrellas? To every store on the island. But then at the end of the day, those photos, like it fit their vibe because they were very like old world, old Hollywood, like
Old
very
Hollywood
romantic,
vibes.
black and white. And the pictures of them like kissing under the umbrella, of him like holding the umbrella off to the side, like it was so on point, and those
It was
photos were
so perfect.
amazing.
It
Yeah,
was
it
so,
was
and
great.
then, and again, like they just thought, oh, great. Like they ordered them and here they are. No, we were on an island. Like you can't, there is no same day delivery for Amazon. Like, and so maybe with a budget or a lovely planner, you wouldn't get that service. You'd get, I'm so sorry, like tell your guests to bring umbrellas, or we have to move your ceremony to the dance floor because we don't have a tent.
And
Whereas with,
again, there's nothing wrong with that.
no, there's
Absolutely
nothing
nothing
wrong
wrong
with
with that.
that. But if you're going with somebody who has this experience under their belt, who has endured this kind of a situation and understands that like our clients, particularly because of how much our clients pay, are well worth the crazy amounts of effort that we're about to put in,
Yeah.
then you're getting a luxury service.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And those things, obviously elevated costs come with those things, right? And again, there's not a right or wrong here. It is about the experience that you are wanting to have, not only as a couple planning the wedding, but the experience you want to give to your guests, right? And so again, there's absolutely nothing wrong. Taryn, I went to a dear friend from high school's wedding a couple of years ago, and they had faux flowers and they had white folding chairs, which You will never see a TS Wed wedding with white folding chairs because we loathe them with a passion. Um, and at the end, we're like all hanging out at the end of the night, and the groom, who was my friend, comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, like as a wedding planner, what do you think of the wedding?" And before I can even say anything, he goes, "I know the DJ kind of messed up." And I was like, "My love, I had a wonderful time. Like that, I had a wonderful time. I am so happy to be here. I had a wonderful time and I meant every word of it. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. I had an amazing time. It was in a backyard. It was barbecue style. Like I had a great time. It was a budget wedding.
Right.
Hands down as a budget wedding. I would not plan a wedding in that category in that way. But I, as a guest, had a really lovely time. I felt the love. I was so happy to be there. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. So all of these different categories, it's just a preference. It's obviously a budget preference too, but it doesn't mean that you can't have a really wonderful, beautiful affair. You absolutely can, but these are what the differences are. And when you want to have this elevated, fresh flowers, a perfect DJ who has the dance floor playing all night long and the music never glitches, and you want photos that you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't think I could look this good. Like that is where you get into the luxury and the ultra luxury. And it's just a different experience. And for us, we're biased. I think it's worth the money. This is a one-time experience that you, not only for yourselves, but for the people that you love the most, right? It's a little morbid, but like the only time you get all the people you love together in one room is your wedding and when you die. And you're only present for one of those.
Yeah. So, in keeping that in mind, then, how do we know? How can our viewers know what kind of a bride or a couple they are? Like, which category do they fall in? Is it only and exclusively based on their money?
No, not at all. It is, I would say it's three factors. I think the obvious is obviously budget, right? But the next part, I think for me, and Taryn, you talked to me about it too, but is your guest count.
Mm,
So that budget and guest count are going to go hand in hand, right? Because to your point earlier, we had an 11-person wedding, we had a 100-person wedding. Huge price point difference in what they're spending. If your budget is moderate, but you want 300 guests, that's going to dictate that you're more in the DIY or the lovely. If it's moderate and you only have 50 guests, then maybe you're in that luxury category. So I think those two things kind of go hand in hand. And then the next is just experiential, right? Like I would say for the most part, a destination wedding is not the place for a budget wedding. Just because you're flying.
yeah.
Typically speaking, you are flying or your guests are flying. It is taking out time. It's not just like we get off work on Friday and then, wake up Saturday morning and go to a wedding this afternoon.
Right.
This is taking time and planning and effort for your guests. And so when doing that, you need to be a good host. It is your day. It's important that it's your day, but you have to be a good host.
I would say there's one exception to that rule. And I think that the exception to that rule is for like a beachfront wedding. So
Sure.
if your vibe is you're like, I want toes in the sand, ceremony only, and then we're gonna go and have an exquisite meal at this bougie restaurant with like 10 of our friends and family members, then you can do that. And that can be a very luxury experience for a lower price point.
Yeah.
Because there aren't,
And a low guest count.
yeah, and a low guest count. And you can do that. You can do that we've done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's those things, right? And, unfortunately, the way of the world, like it is going to be dependent a lot on the budget and the amount that you're willing to invest in this event. And the thing is, you can have all the money in the world. This is about what is important to you if you want to invest in your wedding day or not. Just because you have tons of money doesn't mean you have to have a luxury or ultra luxury wedding. It means you can, but doesn't mean you have to.
Well, and we've had this happen. We had a very well-known celebrity choose us to plan their wedding in Hawaii, and I won't mention who it is because of NDAs. But this particular person had all the money in the world. That there was not an issue in terms of budgeting for this person. This person could have afforded a $10 million wedding, and it wouldn't have. There would not have been an eye blinked.
Right.
Except for that, for the couple, it wasn't their priority. They said, we just wouldn't feel good about going above this particular number on an event. Like that's not where our priority lies. And that's not where like our hearts live. They certainly had a generous budget,
Mhm.
And they had a lovely event. It was done so beautifully. And they had the time of their lives, as did all of their guests. They were wonderful hosts, but they had how many people? Like 125 people.
Something like that. Yeah.
And they didn't spend a dime over 300,000.
Right.
And that is a lovely event. That was
Mhm.
certainly the
It
beginning of
was
luxury.
bordering on luxury. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the beginning of luxury, but it wasn't the 11 person wedding that we just did for the exact same amount of money.
Right.
So,
Right.
like,
Mhm.
and they were both exquisite experiences that everybody felt so well hosted and cared for, and just their priorities were different. So I think that that's a really important conversation to have before you even start looking into the planning process with your partner, is going, okay, where does the priority lie?
Right. And is it authentic to who you guys are, right? Now, obviously, Taryn and I are event planners. And so for us, a big party with all the hoopla, like that's important to us because we love that. There is connectivity, there's memory making. Like we can go into the reasons why we think it's more than worth it all day long, but it has to be authentic to who the couple is. If the couple are people who host and they want this family connectiveness and they want this experience, they want all of that stuff, then investing in an event like your wedding is going to be worth it for you because these are lifelong memories. These are core memories, not just for yourselves, but for your guests. If that's not your thing, if it's more about like we're just, we're as a couple, we're really authentic and internal and we want to just be together and we want it to be a bit smaller, whatever that priority is, you have to really reflect on like who you are as a couple and what's important to you. And then let go of any preconceived notions about what that means when it comes to your wedding, right?
Yes. Yes. Because I think that's a great point, is that as with many things in life, culture and
Mhm.
society dictates like this is what should be important to you and this is how it should look or how you should prioritize things. And so go and do that. You don't have to do that. Like this is your event, this is your wedding, this is your celebration. You get to do what is best for you, what fills your cup. And
Right.
so I think that that's definitely a playmaker when it comes to what type of wedding, what caliber of wedding do you want to host.
Right.
It matters very, very much.
Yeah, I would say the only other thing I would add to this is to keep in mind at these different levels, and mind you, these are luxury and ultra luxury, I think are pretty market wide. Everybody kind of uses those terms. Our lovely is kind of our term. Budget, I think, is kind of market wide. But I would say something to keep in mind too, as you're trying to decide where you want to fall in this category, is how hands-on you want to be and how much time you have. Obviously, a budget, something that's more DIY, automatically implies this is going to be very hands-on for you. It can be very hands-on for you. It can be for your guests, right? If you're asking Auntie to make the wedding cake, right? You're asking guests to participate in the creation of the wedding day. That's super hands-on. That's a different experience. And maybe that's just what you're wanting. You want everyone to feel like their hands are creating the wedding day. I would not want that, but maybe that's what you want, right? So you have to consider like, do you have all the time in the world? A wedding planning is a full-time job.
I
It's
know, shocking, shocking.
it's
We
a
do it full
full-time job.
time.
We do it for a living and it is a full-time job. So if you are already wild busy, whether it's with your job, with your kids, with your house, with your friends and family, like you might not have the time for a budget wedding
Right.
because that is going to be a lot more hands-on for you than, I mean, at ultra luxury, you could literally just say, hi, here's the budget plan, a wedding for me, and step away and be done if you wanted. You don't have to. You can be hands-on still. But like, so keep that in mind too. So generally speaking, I think most people fall somewhere in the lovely to luxury category as far as how much time they have or how much time they are willing to spend on a wedding day. Like, do you have time to go through 30 vendors' contracts to make sure that you're getting what you want? Do you have time to make sure you're paying everybody at the specific time that they're wanting you to pay them? Because everybody has a different pay schedule. Do you have time to pull together all of your uh, guests' answers and their RSVPs and their food lists? Because at the ultra luxury, you don't have to worry about that,
Right.
right? Your planner is going to have a team of people who are taking care of that for you versus at Lovely, like you have to figure that out and then send it to your planner, right? So there's going to be those sorts of things that, how much time do you really have, or are you willing to invest into this huge event?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we hope that this kind of shed a little bit of light as you are getting ready to dive into the exciting world of wedding planning. And feel free to, drop a comment if you guys have any like specific questions about what it looks like in terms of budget to lovely to luxury to ultra luxury, or how to maybe navigate through that. And we'll be happy to get in touch with you guys directly.
Yeah, good luck, everybody. Have
Yeah,
fun.
oh, and cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave your questions below for future podcast topics. Subscribe, like, and let us know your favorite tip from this video. Until next time, let's keep making wedding dreams come true together. Bye for now.